Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. 30 years ago, Gail Ritchey, a young woman from a conservative Christian community in rural Ohio, gave birth alone and left her newborn in the woods. Now a devoted mother of three, her quiet suburban life is shattered when DNA evidence links her to the infamous cold case of Geauga's child, leading to her arrest for murder. Authorities dismiss her claim that the baby was stillborn, and the media swiftly begins to vilify her. This is a provocative documentary film. It touches on a lot of very interesting and controversial subjects along the way. And the film is called Baby Doe. We're joined today by the director, Jessica Earnshaw. Jessica, welcome back to Cinemophile.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Wow, this is a powerful film, one that asks more than the usual amount of interactivity between audience and film and filmmaker. Let's talk about how you became involved and how it became Baby Doe.
So I first came across Emily Weaver. She's another girl in the story through an article I had read, and I reached out to Emily's legal team. And what really struck me about reading about Emily was just this whole idea of pregnancy denial, because I'd never heard of it. And I was just, I don't know, I was just really interested to learn more. So I spent some time with her attorneys, time with Emily, who's incarcerated, and also a lot of time with her mother. But that case wasn't moving. They were appealing her conviction, but it just really wasn't moving. So I was looking for another case that was active that I could, and also I found through just meeting Emily and reading a lot about these cases, a lot of these girls are very similar. And there are so many of them. It's not like a one-off incident. So I felt like it was really important to have at least another woman in the picture. And that's when I came across Gail by just putting a Google alert out there on my phone. She was also in Ohio. I thought her case was interesting because it had been a cold case for 27 years and different from Emily, who had given birth in a toilet basically when she was pregnant when she was 19, gave birth and was arrested when she was 20. Gail had given birth around the same time, as far as her age went, but it had been a cold case for 27 years and she was being arrested in her mid 50s and now was a mother and a grandmother. So that's how I came across it.
Because we are following the family in real time, certainly during the trial of Gail.
Mhm.
What level of trepidation and or embrace did you experience when you approached the Ritchie family?
So I reached out to her attorneys. Her attorneys knew Emily's attorney. So Emily's attorneys put in a good word for me with the attorneys and Gail's attorneys. And I contacted her attorney. He suggested I come to Ohio and meet with them in person, that they were open to meeting with me. When I met them in person, it was his law office, and I spent about 4 hours with them, talking a lot about the time I had spent with Emily and my intentions to bring awareness to to pregnancy denial and what I was seeing as somewhat similar cases. Gail at first had a lot of trepidation about this. I mean, there had been so much negative media around her case, and she was actually not very interested in being involved at the beginning. But after spending a lot of time with her and in that meeting and talking so much about Emily and also that I was really looking to cover a case where I really wanted the person to be very willing to have me there, because what I was asking for was such an immense amount of access.
Yeah.
And that I really feel like it's a collaboration, that the person would have to allow me to be there, for the good times, but also the bad. And so at the end of talking, Gail basically said, look, I'll do this if I can help Emily. If my story can help Emily, then I will do this. So they did want to take a little bit of time, though, of course, to talk to their children and make sure they were all on board. But that's kind of how it started.
Big part of the film is told through the eyes of Mark Ritchie, her husband. He is very interactive. He's very much a part of supporting Gail, but also wanting to get her story out. He is behind her. And as the film evolves, I can't understate this, I really can't, how the film morphs in very subtle ways, very kind of interesting ways. And Mark's a big part of the story, but I don't think I realized just how much until later on in the film. I hope I'm not being too cryptic for people listening to our conversation, but this film pulls on a lot of different threads. And I love the way you're able to kind of keep it all within our range of being able to understand what's going on. And I think that's really a strength of the film, is to keep that kind of in front of us, that kind of forward-looking kind of approach to telling her story. So let's talk about Gail, just in terms of the kind of person she is, a little bit about her background.
Sure. Yeah. So when I first met Gail, I mean, prior to meeting her, I'd only really read what I could see online about her. When I first met her at the attorney's office, my first impression of Gail was that she was holding a lot. Like it
Yes.
just felt like the world was on her shoulders. And I immediately liked her. I mean, I felt that she was very sweet. Very much like I had flown in that day and I was also flying out that day. So I was there for a period of time, but I was not like watching the time, but I was aware that I had to leave at let's say like 4:30 or something to get to the airport. And Gail had asked me where I'd come from and when I was leaving. And when she knew that I had to get to an airport at a certain point, like Gail was tracking the time for me, like through the whole thing. She was worried about, traffic. Would I get there okay? And that was just something that I think is so Gail. And that's something I learned about her through this time I spent with her. She's somebody who really is constantly thinking of others really in some ways to the detriment of herself. Like she's not even in the equation for most of the time. I think she's a mother. She always wanted to be a mother. I think when she was younger, Gail grew up in a home where her father was an alcoholic. There was a lot of like emotional kind of abuse coming her way. She, was very insecure. And she ended up finding the church when she was quite young as a way, she said, to like kind of get away from her home, get away from her father, and have like this community. And I think growing up in the church, and she ended up meeting Mark when I think she invited Mark to her 16th birthday. He was also at the church, and they started dating. And I think she just felt like, how could this person, like, who I think is so amazing, like, feel like care about me, want to date me? I mean, her
Yeah.
sense of self is so low. So much of her purpose is actually like her children and her family. And but growing up, she had, it was a tough time at home. And I think that the thread that I feel like with Gail that kind of goes across all time is this putting other people before herself. And really that's kind of how the trouble she got herself into in a way is being very concerned when she ended up getting pregnant, being concerned that getting pregnant out of wedlock was going to hurt Mark, it's going to hurt the community, like, her it was going to make her father furious at her because he had actually said to her growing up, like, no daughter of mine will ever have a child out of wedlock. She just had no idea what to do, so she just pretended like it wasn't happening. And that's kind of that's a lot of information, but yeah.
And I don't think I've said this enough. She is eventually held to account for the death of the baby that she gave birth to in the woods. I mentioned that part of so she's now on trial. That's obviously a huge part of this forensic accounting of what happened. And you mentioned Emily's case. And this introduces into the conversation something I wasn't familiar with, and becoming more through this film, becoming more familiar with this idea of unperceived pregnancy, and whether it's a physiological, I won't say denial, but or psychological or whatever it is. This is a huge part of her story. So this is a new phenomenon, and I think this is to me. I'm just going to say it's a new phenomenon, but it's not something new to people who have studied this part of the medical field that has sprung up around it. Let's talk a little bit about that as well. Just what is that?
The experts have called it different things, but I think where they've landed right now is unperceived pregnancy. It's called, like, I think it's said in our film, they've called it unperceived pregnancy in our film, but also pregnancy denial. Like, basically, when a girl will almost like magical thinking, like just be like, this isn't happening, push it down. The best way it was described to me was like, if you had like, let's say you had a lump on your side and you were like terrified of could that be a tumor or something, and you're just you're scared to go to the doctor to get the news that it might be what you are scared it might be. So you just pretend like it's not happening until you just can't ignore it anymore. And that for these girls ends up being the time when they actually give birth. But if they're not part of this denial, which I think is so fascinating, is that one might say, well, how can you deny a pregnancy? Like, you would start looking pregnant and then you would be forced to admit that you're pregnant. But the body and the mind are so fascinating because these women aren't necessarily looking pregnant. And that then compounds the denial that maybe they're not. So I think in Emily's case, she did take a pregnancy test, but she never looked at the results. And for Gail, she suspected that she might be pregnant, but she just kind of was like, no, this isn't happening. She didn't have a plan, but because the denial was so intense, like even looking back, she doesn't really remember how she felt about it because she really just buried it. I mean, these girls are still kind of spotting in with their periods. They're not looking pregnant. Nobody is noticing. Um, they're not getting morning sickness. Even both women, when they gave birth, they don't remember having any contractions. They gave birth really quickly on these toilets. Like, it's fascinating.
It really is. And there's just so many components, moving parts, the family. And, intuitively or innately, I don't know if that's the right word, you're looking for a tell. You're looking for something that will tip the scales one way or the other in terms of what happened and who's accountable. And we see her legal team, we see other component parts of this, and then we see a very conservative Ohio community and how all that plays out, and her church and her husband Mark, who again I mentioned is very much a part of the telling of the story. But before we go any further, I want to remind our listeners we're speaking with Jessica Earnshaw. She is the director of the documentary film we're talking about called Baby Doe. It's coming out on July 10th, so be looking for it in theaters, and certainly soon after that, if it'll be on VOD coming up. So be looking for it. Baby Doe, terrific documentary film. As the film progresses, we get more information about this condition. We see medical experts, not only in the course of the trial, but also outside of the trial, talking about this pregnancy denial. And it's a fairly long history of people looking into it.
I talked to an expert about pregnancy denial and these girls, and I was like, well, what can you do to prevent this from happening? And he said the best way to prevent this from happening is for parents to tell their children, like, if you ever get pregnant, you can come to me. There won't be any judgment. We'll help you, like, to kind of get rid of that fear. Because I think speaking to Gail and her father, I do think Gail was scared to tell him, like, didn't actually feel like there would be any support, didn't was scared to know what the repercussions of that would
Yeah.
be because she was getting the message that you do not get pregnant out of wedlock. I think this isn't like these women are not psychotic. This is so driven by fear and shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the thing and I think that's a big reason that I actually wanted to make this film, because when I thought about a girl, and often these girls are between the ages of 16, early 20s. Often they're giving birth in their parents' bathrooms while the family is home. So to me, the idea of a girl being that age, being pregnant, having nobody to tell is heartbreaking to me. I just can't imagine being that age and having nobody to tell. I can't imagine being the age I am now, being pregnant and having nobody to tell. Like, I think there's like a complicity in our society that this even happens, that girls are not feeling like they can tell anybody in their lives.
Absolutely. Well, it really is an engaging documentary film. And like Jacinta, flawed characters in this film, but you're rooting for them. You're pulling for her because seems to be such a decent person. And yeah, congratulations on another wonderful documentary. I want to let people know that the film Baby Doe is opening at the DC TV John Alpert's outfit in New York City on July 10th. Congratulations on that. And it will be rolling out to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, Seattle, and other cities. Hopefully, it won't be too long before you're out here in Southern California screening.
Play the 14th at Glendale, Lumley,
Okay.
and played 15th in North Hollywood.
Well, that is good news for Southern California film goers. Again, the film we're talking about is Baby Doe. It will be opening at the Laemmle Glendale on the 14th of July, as well as the NoHo Laemmle on July 15th. Jessica Earnshaw, thank you so very much for your time, and thank you so much for being here on Cinemaphile.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to speak to you.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.